Good afternoon. My name is Jessica Robinson, and I am currently in the position of Minister-Counsellor Economics in Australia's embassy in Tokyo. And I'm really pleased today to be able to give you a bit of a picture about what's happening in Australia in terms of data management, but importantly, the important role that fintechs are playing in the Australian regulatory landscape. So it's probably no surprise that Australia has one of the fastest growing fintech sectors in the world, and it's built upon a $10 trillion financial services sector industry. Our ecosystem has recently been recognised as the standout hero, preparing for greater international expansion. With more than 800 fintech firms, Australia has one of the most mature and sophisticated financial technology industries in the world. And Australians are really quick to adopt digital technology in the financial sector. It makes Australia a prime area to test new and innovative products and services. In the fintech sector, the Australian regulators have adopted a pragmatic approach to fintech regulation to encourage innovation whilst maintaining market stability. There are initiatives that have been undertaken by regulators that help newly established businesses like fintechs to overcome some of the regulatory burdens, challenges and barriers to entry. For example, the enhanced regulatory sandboxes and restricted authorised deposit-taking institution licences are examples of these. Perhaps one of the most important developments in the Australian regulatory architecture, though, is the importance that data is now playing in the financial services sector, and the important role in particular that fintechs are taking in terms of supporting disruption in the way that Australians engage with financial services and the new ecosystems being created around data management. One of the most significant reforms that the Australian government has introduced to harness these data-driven services is the consumer data right. While other elements of the Australian regulatory architecture govern different aspects of data management and data protection, the consumer data right is an important aspect of the digital economy, and in particular was first launched in the banking sector. It's now being rapidly expanded across other parts of the financial sector, including insurance, superannuation, non-banking sectors, as well as outside the financial sector to the telecommunications and energy sectors. Some of the key policy drivers for this are driving innovation, competition and productivity growth, alongside really important objectives such as consumer empowerment and data protection, reflecting the significant concerns that the Australian community have around data management. Research highlights that consumers have been unhappy and resentful about the risks they're forced to take with data being collected, particularly in relation to the practices of social and research media collection of their data with no way to limit that and opening themselves to a whole range of risks such as scams, data and ID theft, and even direct marketing that they don't want. Up until now, consumers have had little control over the data they generate and get very little benefit from that data being collected by businesses. The CDR places consumers at the heart of data sharing and protects their privacy and gives them the ability to opt in and determine when and how their data is shared with businesses and professionals of their choosing. In this way, the CDR reflects a significant shift, giving consumers a safe and convenient way to use their data for their own benefit for the first time. Consumers can use their data to identify better service providers that meet their needs, do things like take out loans and apply for new mortgages or budgeting apps to help manage their finances. For small business enterprises, consumer data right can drive efficiencies through managing cash flow, invoicing and bill management. Using consumer data right saves businesses and individuals time and effort and makes it easier to manage financial and other life decisions. It's no surprise that the reform commenced in the banking sector, with Australia being dominated by 4 big banks. it's paving the way for technology companies and fintech startups to play a significant role in changing the landscape of what products and services are offered in the financial sector. So how does the consumer data right work? Well, it's embedded in legislation in the Consumer and Competition Act in Australian law. The consumer data right is an interoperable framework governed by rules, standards and protocols that protect privacy and data security, but also importantly allow IT systems to communicate seamlessly. It has an important feature of involving accrediting service providers, and accreditation is only provided where providers meet certain high standards for security and data protection. Data holders can only share data with consumers' consent, and the consent is time limited for a specific purpose and can be withdrawn at any time. If the CDR data is no longer needed, the consumer can choose whether the data is deleted or de-identified, and it cannot be traced back to them. The legislation also importantly sets out the roles for decision makers like the Minister and the roles of key regulators such as the Australian Consumer and Competition Commission and the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner, as well as setting up an important new role, which is the Australian Data Standards Chair, which plays an important role in setting consistent standards for APIs to ensure that data sharing is interoperable. Wherever possible, the consumer data right rules are drafted in a way that means that they can apply across sectors because this is an economy-wide reform, with the majority of rules being able to be applied to a range of different sectors. So challenges and opportunities. For Australia's approach to data management and digital supervision, to a large extent relies on enhancing the capabilities and the roles of existing regulators rather than creating new regulators. But we have put quite significant emphasis on introducing new tools such as regulatory sandboxes. Australia has had a regulatory sandbox since 2016 to support innovative startup fintech companies. The regulatory sandbox allows certain entities to test innovative financial services or credit activities without obtaining an Australian financial service licence or an Australian credit licence. It alleviates some of the barriers to entry for growth for fintech startups applying for and complying with some of these licences. Enhancements to the original sandbox were made in 2020 to further promote Australia's fintech capability to support innovative businesses while encouraging innovation that delivers choice and minimises risk for consumers. The changes were aimed at making the sandbox more accessible to a wider variety of services, products and entities if certain conditions were met. In particular, the expansion recognised that innovation could come in the form of improvements to products and services rather than wholesale new offerings. Similar testing environments have been established to support accreditation processes under the Consumer Data Right Framework, with mock data holders registered and mock data recipients created to support testing data environments. Challenges for Australian regulators include the important role that IT skills play and the new role of monitoring data flows in those ecosystems. It's changing the way that regulation is being developed, and importantly, the partnership role that regulators now have with industry participants, requiring a highly coordinated and organised approach between the various regulators that operate in the Australian financial services. The opportunities for data management and digital supervision include supporting the growth of a thriving data ecosystem where regulatory frameworks such as consumer data right ultimately increase the power of consumers directly to derive consumer-orientated products and services in the financial sector. In Australia, this will be underpinned by the expansion of the consumer data right to include a new aspect called action initiation, which will enable third parties to take actions on behalf of consumers, such as making payments opening bank accounts and closing bank accounts on behalf of the consumer. The expectation is that more accredited businesses will begin to offer products and services powered by consumer data rights that will help extract tangible benefits for consumers and derive value for the information that businesses collect on their behalf. The consumer data right also, importantly, provides an opportunity to enhance financial literacy of the Australian population, both from financial management tools that will be available and being able to use real transaction data to look for services that are a better fit for their circumstances. In the long term, in Australia, we don't expect to be talking about the consumer data right framework over the long run, because it's just going to be simply underpinning the way consumers share their data safely and securely, and it will build a more financially literate society where consumers are empowered to make better use of their money and time and enjoy greater convenience. Thank you very much.